My sister copied my business idea and launched first. At 11:07 p.m., she texted me a screenshot of TechCrunch covering her new app launch. Snooze you lose, little bro. I stared at the headline. Revolutionary sleep tracking app Dream Cycle raises $2.3 million in seed funding. Every feature, every detail. It was my idea. An AI-powered sleep app I'd been building quietly for years. While she celebrated publicly, my phone started ringing. Unknown numbers, missed calls, voicemails I wasn't ready to open yet, because what my sister didn't know was that she hadn't just launched first. She'd launched something that didn't belong to her. By the time I opened the TechCrunch article, my hands were shaking. Not because of the funding amount, not because of the headlines, but because I recognized everything. The interface, the onboarding flow, the sleep stage graph colors, the way the app faded from deep blue to soft orange right before wake-up. The micro animations I'd obsessed over for weeks. Even the wording on the first screen, let your body decide when to wake. I'd written that line at 3 in the morning, half asleep myself. This wasn't similar. It wasn't inspired by. It was my app. My sister Stephanie had launched it under her name. Stephanie wasn't just my older sister. She was the family success story. Stanford MBA, serial entrepreneur, the kind of person relatives brag about at weddings. 4 years ago, she'd launched her first app, a productivity tool, and sold it for just over $1 million. Ever since then, my parents talked about her like she'd cracked some secret code to life. She knows what she's doing, my mom would say anytime her name came up. She's built real companies, my dad would add, usually while looking straight at me. Because I was the opposite. I dropped out of college 2 years ago to code. No MBA, no big exit, no fancy pitch decks, just long nights, cheap coffee, and an idea I couldn't let go of. A smart sleep app, one that didn't just track your sleep, but learned your REM cycles and optimized when to wake you up, night after night. I'd been working on it quietly for years. Stephanie knew that. I told her about it last Christmas. We were sitting at the dining table, half-empty plates, family pretending not to listen. I explained the concept in simple terms. AI-powered sleep optimization, personalized wake times, long-term learning. She laughed, actually laughed. Sleep apps are saturated, she said, waving it off. Nobody cares. You're overthinking it. My mom nodded like that settled it. Maybe you should listen to your sister, she told me. She understands the market. That night, I went back to my laptop and kept coding. Now, months later, I was staring at screenshots of Dream Cycle, Stephanie's new app, featured on TechCrunch like it had come out of nowhere. Same idea, same execution, same details no one would copy by accident. And then my phone buzzed. A message from Stephanie. Snooze you lose, little bro. I didn't reply. I just kept scrolling, and that's when the calls started coming in. I didn't confront her. That surprised even me. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. Every instinct told me to fire back, to text her screenshots, to call her out publicly, to ask how she could do this to me and still smile about it. But I didn't do any of that. Instead, I closed the article, locked my phone, and sat there staring at my laptop like it might explain what I was supposed to do next. Because here was the part no one else saw. I wasn't some confident founder waiting for my moment. I was broke. I dropped out of school. I was juggling freelance gigs just to cover rent. Some months I chose between paying for cloud servers or groceries. If this blew up in my face, there was no safety net. Stephanie had parents who believed in her, connections, a reputation that opened doors. All I had was unfinished code and a sinking feeling in my chest. That night I scrolled through our old messages, her laughing emojis, her casual dismissal, the way she'd brushed off my idea like it was a phase I'd grow out of. And underneath all that, something worse. The realization that this hadn't been impulsive. This wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't parallel thinking, it was deliberate. She hadn't just launched first. She'd waited until I was far enough along that she could recognize what to take. I powered up my laptop and opened my project folder. Hundreds of files, years of work, late nights no one clapped for. I didn't know yet how I was going to respond. I only knew one thing. If I moved too fast, I'd lose everything. So I did the one thing she never expected. I stayed quiet. Looking back, the worst part wasn't the launch. It was how patient she'd been. After that Christmas dinner, Stephanie didn't bring up my app for a while. Weeks passed, then months. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Then she started asking questions, not obvious ones, casual ones. At first, it was during family gatherings. Sitting on the couch while our parents watched TV, she'd glance over at my laptop and smile. "So, are you still working on that sleep thing?" she'd ask, like she was making polite conversation. I'd nod. "Yeah, slowly," she'd laugh. "Of course you are." But then the questions shifted, not what I was building, but how I was thinking about it. How do you stop false wake-ups? Do users hate alarms or do they just hate bad timing? Is the goal accuracy or consistency? They sounded philosophical, high level, the kind of questions mentors ask. And that's how she framed it. She told me she wanted to help. "I've raised money before," she said one night after dinner. "You don't want to build something investors won't understand." I should have shut down the conversation right there. Instead, I did what younger siblings always do. I trusted her. I kept things vague, or at least I thought I did. I didn't show her code. I didn't share files, but I explained logic. I talked about problems I'd solved, trade-offs I'd made. I told her why traditional sleep apps failed users, why consistency mattered more than perfection, why waking someone during the wrong phase ruined their entire day. She listened carefully, too carefully, and every time I hesitated, she reassured me. "I'm not building anything," she'd say. "I just think it's cool." Our mom backed her up. "She's just curious," she told me once when I mentioned it felt strange. "She's done this before. She knows how these things work." So I let it go. Then Stephanie stopped asking questions altogether. No follow-ups, no comments, no curiosity, just silence. At the time, I was relieved. I thought she'd lost interest. I thought I'd passed some invisible test. But silence, I learned later, isn't disinterest. It's confirmation. Months later, when I finally downloaded Dream Cycle, it hit me all at once. The app didn't just look like mine. It thought the same way, the same assumptions, the same priorities, the same decisions made at the same forks in the road, choices you don't copy by accident, choices you only make if you understand the problem the same way I did. That's when I replayed every conversation in my head, every helpful question, every moment I'd tried to sound confident instead of cautious, every time I'd explained why instead of just what. She hadn't taken everything in one move. She'd taken it piece by piece, slowly, carefully, and by the time I realized it, she didn't need me anymore. The morning Dream Cycle launched, I didn't hear about it from Stephanie. I heard about it from everyone else. My phone buzzed nonstop while I was still half asleep. Group chats, old classmates, a Slack message from a freelance client. "Isn't this basically your app?" That was the first thing that made my stomach drop. Then I opened TechCrunch. The headline wasn't subtle. "Former unicorn founder launches Dream Cycle, raises $2.3 million in seed funding." Former unicorn founder. They weren't calling her my sister. They weren't calling her a first-time founder. They were calling her proven. I scrolled. There was her photo, confident smile, same one she'd used in pitch decks years ago. Below it, a quote attributed directly to her. "I spent 18 months developing a proprietary AI system that learns individual sleep patterns and optimizes wake times for long-term health." 18 months. I stared at that sentence longer than I want to admit because it wasn't just a lie, it was a specific lie. Not vague enough to be accidental, not broad enough to be misunderstood. She was planting a flag, and TechCrunch printed it like fact. I kept scrolling, my chest tightening with every paragraph. Screenshots of the app, feature breakdowns, praise from early users, everything framed as her vision. There was no mention of collaboration, no hint of parallel development, no acknowledgement that someone else might have been working on something similar. The narrative was already written. By noon, it was everywhere. LinkedIn posts praising her second act. Founders congratulating her on doing it again. Investors commenting flame emojis and rocket ships. Even my parents shared the article. My mom texted me right after. "Did you see this? Your sister is amazing." I didn't reply. I downloaded Dream Cycle instead. I told myself I was doing it out of curiosity. That was a lie. I went through the onboarding slowly, tapped through every screen, watched how it explained itself, and with every swipe, the same cold realization settled deeper. She wasn't just presenting the app as hers, she was presenting the thinking behind it as hers. The assumptions, the priorities, the philosophy. The app didn't just claim innovation, it claimed origin. By the afternoon, Stephanie finally reached out. Not with an apology, not with an explanation, just another message. Crazy launch, right? I stared at it for a long time. That's when it hit me. She hadn't just stolen my work. She'd rewritten history in real time. And the longer I stayed silent, the more permanent her version became. That night, my phone buzzed again. An unfamiliar number. Voicemail left. Professional tone, calm, measured. Hi, this is Jennifer Park from Axiom Ventures. We're the lead investors in Dream Cycle. We need to speak with you regarding a patent filing under your name. My heart started pounding. Not because I was excited, but because I understood something all at once. This wasn't a family problem anymore. It wasn't even a personal betrayal. It was about to become a legal one. And once that happened, there was no way back. The meeting was scheduled for that afternoon. No warning, no pleasantries, just an email with a calendar invite and a single line. This is time sensitive. When I walked into the conference room, it felt like I was already behind. 4 lawyers, 2 investors, 1 long glass table. Jennifer Park sat at the center, calm, composed, the kind of person who never raised her voice because she never had to. Stephanie wasn't there. That should have reassured me. It didn't. Jennifer gestured for me to sit. Let's be clear, she said. This isn't personal. This is due diligence. One of the lawyers slid a folder across the table. 27 months ago, he said, a provisional patent was filed for a system involving adaptive sleep cycle analysis and optimized wake timing. He looked up. Filed under your name. My mouth was dry. I nodded. That's correct. Another lawyer leaned forward. 4 months ago, that provisional converted into a full utility patent. Granted. Again, under your name. Jennifer folded her hands. Your sister assured us this was unrelated. There it was, the assumption, the unspoken belief that I was the mistake in the equation. She told us, Jennifer continued, that your project was a basic alarm app, no proprietary system, no learning model. I felt my stomach twist, because for a second, I wondered if they'd already decided. I took a breath and opened my laptop. I didn't come here to argue, I said. I came to show you. I started with the least dramatic thing I had. Time. GitHub commit logs, dates, hundreds of them. Commits from nights I barely remembered. Commits from weekends when everyone else was out celebrating her last exit. One of the lawyers interrupted. Code can be rewritten. I know, I said. That's why I didn't stop there. Next, I pulled up beta tester agreements, signed 18 months before Dream Cycle's launch, emails from users describing bugs that Dream Cycle had already fixed in the same way I had. Jennifer's expression shifted, not convinced, but no longer dismissive. Then came the texts. I hesitated before showing them, because this part wasn't technical. It was personal. Stephanie's messages, her laughing dismissal, her sleep apps are saturated line, the questions she'd asked months later. One of the lawyers leaned back slowly. This establishes access, he said. Another added, quieter, and intent. Jennifer didn't speak for a long time. Then she asked the question I'd been dreading. Why didn't you launch first? The room went silent, because there wasn't a good answer. I didn't have funding, I said. I didn't have a team. I was still refining the product. One lawyer raised an eyebrow. So you moved slower? And now you want us to believe that doesn't matter? For a moment, I thought that was it. That all the work, all the restraint, wouldn't be enough. Jennifer finally spoke. Patents don't reward speed, she said. They reward originality. She turned to the legal team. What's our exposure? One of the lawyers didn't hesitate. Severe. Another added, every day this app stays live increases liability. Jennifer exhaled slowly. Then she said something that made my chest tighten. We need to speak with Stephanie immediately. The meeting paused. Phones came out. Messages were sent. And for the first time since this started, I wasn't the one waiting. They didn't ask me to leave. They asked me to wait. That was worse. I sat alone in the conference room while they stepped out to make calls. The glass walls didn't block sound completely. I could hear fragments. Legal language, short sentences, someone saying, "That's not acceptable." My phone buzzed. Stephanie. I didn't answer. Then again, then again. The third call went to voicemail. Her voice was tight, controlled in the way people get when they're trying not to panic. "Why are investors calling me about your patent?" "What did you tell them?" I set the phone face down. 10 minutes later, the door opened. Jennifer came back in first. The lawyers followed, quieter now, focused. She didn't sit. "We've spoken to your sister," she said. No preamble. "She maintains she developed Dream Cycle independently." One of the lawyers cut in. "She also claims your patent is overly broad and unenforceable." My heart sank. Jennifer held up a hand. "That's her position," she said, "not ours." She turned the folder toward me. "Our legal team reviewed your filings in detail." One page slid forward, then another. "Your claims are narrow," the lawyer explained. "Specific, well-supported, exactly what courts look for." Another added, "They map cleanly onto DreamCycle's core functionality." Jennifer met my eyes. "That puts us in a position we don't like." She didn't say illegal. She didn't have to. "If we continue operating," she said, "we assume liability, not just for infringement, but for willful infringement." That word landed hard. Willful, meaning they knew, meaning damages multiply. I swallowed. "So what happens now?" I asked. Jennifer paused, then said it. "We're freezing Dream Cycle immediately." My ears rang. "App stores will be notified today. Marketing stops, development pauses," she continued like she was reading a checklist. "Your sister is being removed from any executive role effective immediately." The room felt too quiet. My phone buzzed again. Stephanie. 17 missed calls now. Jennifer glanced at the screen, then back at me. "We're not here to punish anyone," she said. "We're here to protect our fund." She folded her hands. "That said, we have a product to salvage." One of the lawyers slid a new document across the table. Term sheet. My breath caught. Jennifer spoke carefully. "We'd like to acquire your patent outright." She waited. $850,000. I didn't move. She continued. "In addition, 5% equity in any future sale of the app." The lawyer chimed in. "And we'd want you to lead development." CTO, market competitive salary. $145,000 base, Jennifer said. "Effective immediately." I stared at the paper. This was the part people dream about. And yet my hands felt cold. Because somewhere outside that room, my sister was realizing everything she'd built in the last week was disappearing. I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. I just asked one question. "What happens if she fights this?" Jennifer didn't hesitate. "Then we let the courts decide." And for the first time since the launch, I knew exactly where this was going. She didn't apologize. She didn't try to negotiate. 2 days after Dream Cycle was pulled from the app stores, I was served. A thick envelope, formal language, my name typed in bold. Stephanie was suing me. IP theft, interference with business relationships, defamation. According to the filing, I was a bitter younger brother who couldn't stand her success. Someone who'd retroactively claimed ownership to sabotage her company. Reading it felt surreal. She was rewriting the story again. Only this time it wasn't for TechCrunch. It was for a judge. Marcus was practically glowing when I handed him the papers. "This is a gift," he said, flipping through the pages. "She just opened Discovery." I didn't understand what he meant at first. Then he explained. "When you sue someone, you don't just tell your side of the story. You have to prove it. Emails, contracts, early drafts, internal communications. And that's when Marcus found it. Her first app, the one everyone celebrated, the one that sold for $1 million. There had been another name attached to it early on, a co-founder, someone who disappeared quietly before the exit. Marcus dug deeper. Old filings, archived domain records, a settlement agreement buried under layers of corporate restructuring. Same pattern, same story. She'd claimed sole ownership after launch, filed paperwork without the other founder's knowledge, settled when threatened, but forced an NDA to keep it quiet. Marcus leaned back in his chair when he laid it all out. "She's done this before," he said, "and now it's documented." During depositions, Stephanie doubled down. She insisted everything was hers, that she'd conceived Dream Cycle alone, that my work was experimental at best. The judge didn't interrupt, just listened. Then Marcus presented the timeline. My filings, her questions, the TechCrunch quote, and finally, the prior settlement. The room went silent. The judge looked directly at Stephanie. "Have you ever been involved in an IP dispute before?" he asked. She hesitated. "Just long enough." "Yes," she said, "but it's unrelated." Marcus slid one final document forward. "It's not," he said quietly. "It's identical." The ruling didn't come immediately, but when it did, it was devastating. The court found that I owned the intellectual property in full, that Stephanie had acted in bad faith, and that the lawsuit itself was an abuse of process. She was ordered to pay $100,000 in damages, plus my legal fees, and most importantly, the finding became public record. I didn't feel victorious. I felt exhausted because I knew what that record meant. In tech, background checks are thorough. Investors don't just look at products, they look at patterns. And now Stephanie had one she couldn't erase. The fallout didn't happen all at once. It never does. At first, it was small things. Stephanie's LinkedIn headline changed. Founder disappeared. Then CEO. A week later, DreamCycle's website redirected to a blank page with a generic holding message. No announcement, no explanation. Investors moved on quickly. They always do. Word spread without anyone needing to say much. A legal finding like that doesn't stay quiet in tech circles. It shows up in background checks, in diligence reports, in whispered side conversations during pitch meetings. Stephanie found that out the hard way. I heard from a mutual contact that she'd tried to float a new idea to an early-stage fund. They never called her back. Another time, she interviewed for a senior product role. 3 rounds in, everything seemed promising. Then silence. No rejection email, just nothing. The kind of silence that tells you the decision wasn't about skills. At home, things were different. My dad called me for the first time in months. "We didn't know," he said, "about the filings, about how long you'd been working." I told him it was fine. It wasn't. But I didn't say that. My mom left a voicemail later that night. She asked me to be the bigger person, to let things go, to remember we were family. I didn't call back, not because I was angry, because for the first time I wasn't explaining myself. A month later, I started my new role. Same code base, same idea, just no longer in the shadows. A team of 12 now, designers, engineers, QA, people who asked before taking. Sometimes late at night, I'd think about how close I came to losing everything by staying quiet too long, and how strange it felt that the thing that saved me wasn't speed, but patience. I never heard Stephanie apologize. I don't expect I ever will. The last thing I saw from her was a LinkedIn post. Sometimes setbacks teach us humility. The top comment had more likes than the post itself. Setback? Or consequences? I closed the app and went back to work. Because I finally got to build what I'd been protecting all along.